Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Brief. I'm your host, Meredith Reed. I'm here today with Katie Zigelman, Head of Product for Spectrum Labs. Katie works closely with the engineering team to build products that enable customers to reach their trust and safety goals. Welcome, Katie.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So glad to have you here. So we talked about the importance of fighting caste discrimination online in episode 10 of The Brief, featuring Ami Kumar, who's the founder of Social Media Matters. And we're excited to now have somebody from the inside at Spectrum Labs talk a little bit more about the caste discrimination model that Spectrum Labs was involved with. So can you start by just talking a little bit about how Spectrum Labs came to build a model targeted at identifying caste discrimination?
Sure. Yeah, so this came really from our partnership with Ami at Social Media Matters. He's been such an incredible partner to work with. So he connected with Justin a while ago through a mutual alliance. And Ami came to us and he said, these social media platforms are having this problem. He sits on the board of advisors for Twitter. He works very closely with Facebook and YouTube. So he's very connected when it comes to really what are the problems that these big platforms are solving. And one of them is these platforms are coming to him and saying that they needed help solving caste discrimination. And he came to us and said, we're seeing this problem exists out there. We need a way to actually detect it. Is that something that you can help us with? And so that's where it all started. We outlined what the process would look like, and he signed up, and here we are.
So how do you begin to build that out? How do you translate caste discrimination into a model?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we know what caste discrimination is from a day-to-day life. We know it's illegal in India. The thing that has to start with any new model that you're developing is you need a definition. And that definition needs to really outline what is the goal of this model? What are we trying to do? And then how do we define that specific behavior? So the goal for this one was to detect caste discrimination in conversational text. So then the next thing we looked at is, okay, so what is caste discrimination? And we then broke it down to what is a caste? What does discrimination mean? And then we broke down what is qualifying criteria, meaning what are the things that if text has this, then it is caste discrimination. And so we worked very closely with Ami and his team, which is full of PhD researchers, and he's been in activism his whole life, so he's very familiar with this behavior. And he really helped us outline what are those pieces of qualifying criteria that would make a piece of text or voice or even an image this behavior. And then the next thing that we look at are what are those gray areas that are not actually this behavior? Because sometimes defining those is just as important as defining what is that behavior. So for instance, when it comes to caste discrimination specifically, there are times where discussing castes or discussing that discrimination is happening against them isn't illegal or isn't necessarily negative. And that could be if you're talking about something in the academic world. It could be if you are an activist and you're just bringing this information to surface. So we looked at both what are the things that would make the behavior the thing that we're looking for, and also what are the things that might be really close but actually shouldn't be caught by the model to really define those edges. And that was something that, like I said, we worked very closely with Ami's team to initially define that. And then as we started the actual data labeling process, which is where we look at the data and we look at the definition and we start identifying pieces of data that fit the definition and pieces of data that don't, then as we actually start going through that exercise more and more, then our definition gets smarter because we start to expand it a little bit more because we can put real examples into it. So now it's no longer just these are the qualifying criteria, but these are also the examples that have fit that qualifying criteria. So then the next time that someone goes into label, they can actually see that and it makes the labeling process a lot easier.
So, what are some challenges that are unique to this particular model? I would imagine that there would be some language and translation complications, but could you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So this model, it's very specific to a certain region, and it only exists in certain languages. So for our purposes, we focused on English, Hindi, and Hindi English, which is Hindi language written phonetically using English characters. So there's a lot of things that are tricky about multilingual in general. You know, you can build a model that understands what English looks like, and you can build a model that understands what Hindi looks like. And Spectrum, and we actually have a patent pending approach to be able to go between those two languages. And that all has to do with the embedding alignment part of it, which we can talk about more on a different episode. But for this one, where it was really unique was that third use case of the Hindi English. So this was Hindi language, like I said, written phonetically using English characters. And a couple of things come up with that that's tricky. One of which is that there are many, many ways to phonetically spell something. So if you were, we actually have a great blog post about this that was recently put up on our Medium account that we can link to. But it's not a one-to-one. You know, this word in Hindi doesn't necessarily look like this when written in English. It's a one-to-many. And then another issue is when you're actually training models or building embeddings, which is the process of taking text data and coming up with numerical representation for that data, which then gets fed into the models. That process takes a very, very large data set to build. And when you're thinking about something, especially this Hindi English language, that data doesn't really exist in open source places where a lot of natural language processing off-the-shelf things come from. Like a lot of people will start building their embeddings based off of Wikipedia data or Common Crawl or things that are open source and available. And the difference is that the language that's used in something like Wikipedia is very formal compared to how you and I would talk to each other. So actually getting that conversational data is incredibly important when you're building that numerical representation that you're then going to use with the model. So getting enough data that is in this Hindi-English combined language is really, really tricky. So that's where, again, being able to partner with Ami and his team, who not only helped us identify that we call it a lexicon, that definition for what the model is, and help us with some of the labeling, he was also able to help us identify where to find data that will match what we're looking for so we can really make this model very robust. Another thing that we got to use with this is there are models that look at the full word, and there are also models that can be built that look at just individual characters. And this was a great use of a character-based model, which was pretty cool. And again, something we can talk more about in a different episode.
So thank you for that detailed explanation. That definitely helped me understand a lot more about everything that's going on behind a model like this. So let's talk about the applications of this model. How do you use it in the real world? How do customers connect with this, and how does it become useful?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we work with our customers, they will deploy our models in a way, and we have ways for them to either use our models through a SaaS offering, software as a service. They can ping our API and get a response. Or we do also offer an on-premise solution for our customers who really need to keep that data within their own infrastructure. And either way, we have built everything with a mindset of security by design. So we very much keep the data safe and secure. But what a customer would do is they'd stand up how they actually connect to that data. And then they would put us into the workflow so that let's just use Twitter as an example. When someone tweeted something new, that tweet would be sent into Spectrum's, think about it like an engine. So our behavior identification engine. And that engine would spit out a score. And basically what it would say is the score of how confident the model is that that piece of text or that piece of data is the behavior that we're looking for. So let's say I go on Twitter, I compose a new tweet, I publish it, it gets sent into Spectrum, or it would be sent into Spectrum. Spectrum would then say, this is caste discrimination, or this is not. And then it's really up to the platform to decide what they want to do with that information. So some platforms who are very sensitive to this behavior might say, you know what, this is really terrible behavior, and if we see it, we're going to ban the user, or we're going to suspend the user. Or maybe we're going to send it into a moderation queue to be reviewed by someone. Or maybe we're going to send a user a warning. You know, these platforms have very robust, they're called behavior action matrices of, you know, when we see this behavior, we want to take this action. And so how we fit into the puzzle is we really are that engine that helps them understand what's actually happening so they can then choose which actions to take based off of the behavior.
So that makes sense, but I'm wondering what this looks like on a longer term scale. So you have this model, platforms are able to bring it in and use it as a way to moderate toxic behaviors, caste discrimination on their platform. But what is the long-term impact of using a model like this?
Yeah, so that's something that we're very big on is with our customers, we're not just a one-stop shop. We don't just deliver something and then peace out. We work with our customers through a partnership, and we make sure that the models are constantly being iterated on over time. So they're constantly improving as new trends come out, as people start using new phrases, new words. Something that we've seen in the past is, when there's something new that happens on, let's say, a new YouTube video gets posted, there may be some trends that come out of that go across the whole internet. And those are the kinds of things that just make this concept of model, refining these models so very important. So we partner with our customers. We take their feedback regularly and use that to make the models stronger and more performant. And in this case, we're also very lucky that we do have that partnership with Social Media Matters and Ami's team, because his team is also constantly feeding us new research, new trends that they're seeing in just caste discrimination in general, that we can also incorporate that feedback and that piece of expertise into the model to make it even better and better. So we're very much not just a one-stop shop. We are actually constantly refining the model over time, so it's always getting better and better.
Can you talk a little bit about what Spectrum Labs is doing with this model that makes it unique and cutting edge in what people are doing all over the world with moderation technology?
Yeah, so with this model in particular, I think some of the things that are very unique are that it is very focused on this behavior. There are some behavior identification platforms out there or moderation offerings that give you essentially is this toxic or is this not? And that's not really enough information to really, go to that behavior action matrix and really start deciding how do you respond to different behaviors and how do you encourage your community to have, positive engagements and to get rid of those harmful toxic behaviors. And so something that's very unique about Spectrum is that we do look at the individual behaviors, and we do make our models specific to what people really need to know in order to know how to action. With this one in particular, which is another Spectrum strength, is the multilingual. We don't just give it to you in English. We don't just give it to you in Hindi. We actually are able to support all the different international languages, plus those combined, forgetting the right word for them, but also for the Hindi Englishes and the languages that are phonetically one language and the characters used a different one.
Thank you so much for explaining that a little bit more. We've been so happy to partner with Social Media Matters and Ami on this project. And because we were lucky enough to have him on and talk about the caste discrimination side of what Social Media Matters works on, it's been so great having you here to explain a little bit more about the model that Spectrum Labs has built with Social Media Matters, and how caste discrimination can be built into AI in a model, to really make an impact, a positive impact, online. So thank you so much for being here, Katie.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And we'll see you next time on The Brief.